This is a presentation by Bassey Nsa Ekpe and myself, Meriomame Wekpe. Bassey is of the Department of Performing Arts, Akwa Ibom State University, Nigeria, and I am of the Department of Theatre Arts, University of Benin, Nigeria. The title of our paper is Evoking Interactivity and Fostering Ecomedia, the case of Jeta Amata's Black November. I'll quickly just look at the abstract. A growing concern for a sustainable environment has given rise to a rich corpus of fictional and non-fictional media products that address humans' relationship with the material world. Arguably, eco-films present narratives that submit as a convergence of physical and human environmental interactions. Jeta Amata's filmic presentation, Black November, is one of such. Black November presents the case of the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, addressing the dynamics of ecological struggles and the plights of the people. It goes further to present how a volatile and ravage community wages war against a perceived corrupt government and an international oil corporation in an attempt to save the community from being destroyed by frequent oil spills and excessive drilling. Interestingly, this creative depiction of non-fictional environmental challenges has manifested in an interactive driven medium as a video game that affords players an insight into the challenges and offer them a platform to decide the challenges that are addressed. The video game Niger Delta Commando is domiciled in Google Play Store. It brings to the knowledge of humanity the environmental degradation that defines the Niger Delta region and the resultant effect, which includes the spring of militancy, combining also the efforts initiated to curb activities of militants in the area. Niger Delta Commando opens up a relationship between the game participants and the Niger Delta environment, posing as an integral technological command between humans and ecology. Recognizing that interactivity allows for an alternative process to recreate, reorder, and heighten significant incidents and experiences in order to draw attention for remediation, this study seeks to reconcile the dominant trend in Ecomedia and how the Nigerian narrative presents notions of interactivity, immersive, and environmental imperative that Niger Delta Commando evokes. Leaning on the relative theories of Ecomedia interactivity, this study adopts a dual methodology that is at once analytical and descriptive. It further maintains and appropriates a more detailed rendition and critical scrutiny that aligns the Niger Delta Commando with a more robust outlook. The attempt here is to objectify how this game appreciates interactive media that is unique and reads as a certain innovation in a Nigerian environment. A quick introduction here would enable us just see and appreciate interactivity. Interactivity forms a key element of contemporary digital communication. In the context of this paper, it is considered as an important communicative formation that labels the symbiotic relationship between the filmic representation and video game. Interactivity is not viewed as a characteristic of the medium, but a process-related construct about communication, an extent to which relatedness of messages are recounted between mediums. Raffaelli explains that interactivity, and I quote, an expression of the extent that in a given series of communication exchanges, any third or later transmission of message is related to the degree to which previous exchanges referred to even earlier transmissions. In another vein, Williams et al. Contends that interactivity is the degree to which participants in a communication process have control and can exchange roles in their mutual discourse. We dare say that these positions reconcile interactivity as immersive activity which relies on the viable and spontaneous responses of both subjects and objects, so that there is an overlapping interplay activated in such a manner that the result is infinite and unpredictable. It also reflects a corresponding measure of control and counter-controls within a fluid space and time, allowing for competing gestures from either sides. This phenomenon resonates in the film industry. The landscape of filmic representation has over the years shifted to many interesting ways. The shared evolution of film and video games has recorded high-profile presence in the popular culture. Despite being a relatively new industry, the video games market in Nigeria is going from strength to strength. While the market is valued at about $67 million in the US, as at 2018, it is expected to rise to about $177 million by 2023. This is how Jessica Clement sees this. With this, it is noteworthy that the medium offers a promising landscape for entertainment and economic involvement. Film exerts some form of influence on the development of video games. Both play an integral part in promoting interactivity and consumers' lived experiences. Film and video games cross-pollinate in ways that are both obvious and rewarding. They both influence each other in multiple levels, which include camera technique, narrative structure, technologies of visual representations, special effects, and importantly, thematic concern. Our study is centered on narrative, themes, and imaginary worlds that defines the relationship between Jeta Amata's Black November and the video game Niger Delta Commando. The case explored in this context presupposes the notion that games are mostly influenced by filmic representations. Remarkably though, Niger Delta Commando offers ideas and alternative approaches to Niger Delta challenges, which are the major concerns in Black November. It could be seen as an attempt to ensure the Niger Delta struggle remains relevant and compete for attention. In this case, Niger Delta Commando is riding on the huge presence video games have made in the environmental landscape. As a growing popularity that is particularly fascinating, it has been employed as a strategy to ensure Niger Delta cause remains relevant and compete for needed attention towards better livelihood. Avoiding the common limitations of discussing the mechanics of video games adapted from particular filmic creations, this paper explores the interrelatedness of narratives that links the film Black November and the video game Niger Delta Commando. It seeks to, amongst others, reconcile the dominant trends in Ecomedia and how Nigerian narrative presents notions of interactive, immersive, and environmental imperative that the Niger Delta Commando evokes. Leaning on the relative theories of Ecomedia interactivity, this study adopts a dual methodology. It further maintains and appropriates a more detailed rendition and critical scrutiny that aligns the Niger Delta Commando with a more robust outlook. The attempt here is actually to objectify how the game appreciates interactive media that is unique and reads as a certain innovation in the Nigerian environment. Black November and Niger Delta Commando. Both media products are manifestations of the incorporation of transmedia features. Black November is positioned as a simple narrative-driven filmic product with recognizable structure about the plight of the Niger Delta people. Taking into cognizance the thought perspective of the struggle, Niger Delta Commando, on the other hand, poses as an adventurous experience that operates and supposedly from the perspective of justice by elimination. It presents multiple constructs that votes for the violent elimination of terrorists by the Niger Delta Commando. The Niger Delta militants, assumed in the game as the eponymous Niger Delta Commando, are considered as formulated groups that put up actions against the government for the neglect felt in the Niger Delta. They tend to present in different mixed method ways their agitation for a better ecological and economic region. Ekpe and Thompson notes that the militants' formula for struggle is perceived by some as being destructive instead of productive, though the militants believe they are fighting for the economic emancipation of their land. Black November is a 2015 film that derived its title from the month in which activist Ken Saro-Wiwa was executed in 1995. And it is also a reissued version of the 2021 film Black Gold. Ken Saro-Wiwa was a Nigerian writer, television producer, and environmental activist. He was a member of the Ogoni people, an ethnic minority in Nigeria, whose homeland, Ogoni land in Niger Delta, which has experienced crude oil extraction since the 1960s and has suffered extreme environmental damage from the decades of indiscriminate petroleum waste. Daron and Falola, 63. The film begins in a prison in Warri, the Niger Delta region. The moving images of the hangman's noose dangling from the ceiling, which conjures slates of anger, fear, and pity. In another shot, the calm image of Ebere in a solitary cell. She seems undaunted, her resolve and passion are obvious. Ebere is in her late 20s, and her brilliance had earned her a scholarship to study abroad. The scholarship is an endowment of the international oil company operating in the area. The same oil company that subtly perpetrates violence in the area. At the return of Ebere from school abroad, she notices as she arrives the village that the environment was worse off. In a moment, she sees people running helter-skelter with jerry cans. A pipeline has burst and people scampering to the spillage site, scooping petrol. Meanwhile, one of the policemen set to disperse the crowd lights a cigarette, which causes an explosion. Ebere's mother and siblings die in the explosion. The incident will precipitate reactions and counter-reactions. The situation will turn Ebere into an environmental activist, demanding immediate change in the exploration and exploitation of oil in the Niger Delta region. She will be seen as a threat and terrorist by the military government and even by the oil companies. She will be arrested, jailed, and sentenced to die by hanging. Amata's Black November is an interplay of sorts, an interaction of real and unreal, fact and fiction. It is a creative factionalization of Ken Saro-Wiwa's reality. Ebere suffers the same fate like Saro-Wiwa, who was sentenced by hanging in 1995. Amata draws inspiration from this episode in Nigeria's history. He visually conveys corresponding moments of everyday reality in the Niger Delta with the actions of Ebere, substantially replicating the life of Saro-Wiwa as environmental activist. The Niger Delta Commando, on the other hand, is presented as an interactive medium for the Niger Delta cause. It is described as an addictive shooting game that deals with destroying terrorists in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Players are urged to use fully loaded armor to avenge the death of innocent civilians. The game centers on aiming guns at targets, knocking them down without missing. The game is interestingly manipulative and interactive. It is designed to fight the perceived terrorists in the Niger Delta region. We argue and metaphorize the terrorists as agents of government and the international oil companies or any other entities that pillage and destroy the Niger Delta. Malio Games, as the game's designer, virtually captures the green bamboo sprouting luxuriantly from the depths of the mangrove as backdrop for the immersive game. The ability of the players to interactively navigate the slippery terrain, jumping hurdles and barriers and walls, as in a steeplechase event. These barriers replicate as everyday struggles in the environment. Now, this action will find in Niger Delta Commando as a game differently, because it empowers the player. It empowers the player to interact with his environment and kill those persons before they kill him or her or them in the game. So there is this interaction that takes place where you get points and maximize points in the attempt to make the terrorists not take over your environment. In this regard, Niger Delta environment. What you also find there is the player having to cross hurdles, barriers. And that's also what we will look at with Ebere, crossing hurdles and barriers. And at the end of the day, she's hanged. But with the interactive nature of the Niger Delta Commando, you don't see that. It is determined, the fate of the player is determined by the player. The player controls by its dexterity, the player controls by how manipulative it can be, how interactive, how immersive. The dexterity of the player comes to play in this context. So the relationship between the Niger Delta Commando and Black November finds resonance in both attempts, where one stops and we can only see the play and appreciate the play. The Niger Delta Commando is infinite, not definitive, and continually is interactive. So there are interplays and interlayers and counter layers and counter reactions that the player evokes. Thank you.